put them on.
All right.
Hold on, it's not pulled up. I mean, you can talk. So
Oh, okay.
I'm not
So
ready, so don't.
did you click?
It doesn't happen over
That.
a second. So okay. Looks like we're live.
Okay. Sounds like Pogo's live too tonight. Covered up in the dark. So. Hi everyone. Welcome. I'm Golden Eagle. I'm told I'm supposed to be on my best behavior tonight. Like that's gonna happen. If anybody's ever watched this before, have I ever been on my best behavior? Well, I guess the answer is yes. But my best is probably not what you were hoping for.
The question is, how many have seen you at your worst?
And lived to tell about it? Very few. So, well, some of them live, but the rest of their life is spent as a nude.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I skipped class the day where they taught us how to change the map.
Oh, once a nude, always a nude?
Once I turn you into a nude, you're always a nude. Oh, I love these. We should pull these out more often. These make great water glasses.
It's like
Well,
something
we
you
don't
get
drink anymore. We have all these really awesome glasses.
It's like
From a lifetime ago.
from hospital hours.
These are no. This is the Trinity. Now, this is our personal symbol, right? For our wedding, and it's on our wedding. All our wedding stuff has this symbol on it.
Nice.
And
show that to the camera.
I just did.
Yeah, but longer. You just.
Just waiting in the back.
I'm going somewhere here. Gotta
Okay.
give me a break. And so these were purchased and used for the first time at our wedding dinner. So we're the only owners who've ever used these and never been allowed to drink out of them.
So we have several people online, but Maria's saying that the sound is majorly bad. So
Okay,
I don't know.
I need to know something other than majorly bad.
It's echoey.
Echoey. Do you know how to turn down the microphone? Okay. Ask, is anybody else online?
Yeah, so Mohadid said, yeah, sound is pretty bad, echoing. And Maria says echoing. George says, hey George.
Hi George.
Oh, and Scott says full reverb going on.
Reverb. Something, okay, I had to drive for a minute.
Okay, we're going into
Okay,
a
you go sit down a little bit, please.
Oh, great.
Alright. Okay, that's off. We're not getting.
Talk about your leopard.
But I'm not going to talk about much with reverb. Reverb.
Okay.
Your hair's glowing.
Okay, say something.
Something. How's
Okay. I just made a change. I need feedback from the studio, or the not studio audience, the online audience, if that made a difference in the reverb.
feedback, not reverb?
Fixed. Feedback. Scott Hicks, hi Scott, by the way, says fixed. Wadib says better. Maria says that better. I think it's better.
It's better! Yay!
All right. So you and I are now going to swap places.
You go get me out of here.
Alright.
Yeah, there's a mic in here and there's a mic over there, and normally they both work and there's no problem, but I've seen this once before where I had to turn one of them off, and so I left the good one turned on. All right, let's try this again. Where are we?
We are in Mount Shasta
Mount
live
Shasta.
on Monday night.
Line of Monday night, Golden Eagle Discourses. So welcome. Do we have any newcomers online? I didn't get to finish looking.
Pamela Chappell.
Pamela Chappell. I don't know who Pamela Chappell is. Welcome, Pamela.
Hi, Pamela.
Please introduce yourselves. We love newcomers. I heard there might be guests online tonight. So welcome, guests.
So we have Patty and Mohadib and Dennis Brown
Dennis. Hi, Dennis.
and Maria Balari,
Maria in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Marcel
Marcel. Hi, Marcel.
and George G,
George.
Scott Hicks.
Scott. Big audience today. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, Pamela acknowledges that she is new.
All right.
All right.
When you get a
Welcome,
chance, Pamela, please, the
Dennis introduced her.
and Dennis introduced her. Okay, cool. Welcome. This is the place. We are what's known in the underworld as Toltec North, as opposed to my teacher, Coyote the Blind, who is located in Moreno Valley, 100 miles or so east of Los Angeles, up in the, well, it's called Brown Valley, okay? You figure out what the desert there looks like. So they're Toltec South, well, not the most south, but as far as the U.S.'s West Coast is concerned. So what we do here, we are purveyors of consciousness and consciousness upgrades. And why we do that, how we do that, that's part of the ongoing discussions. So I got a few things to say tonight. We just recently started a series I'm calling the Tonal. Not the tonal, not that nasally English voice, the Tonal. The emphasis on the second syllable. The Tonal is what we in Toltec land refer to as the known universe. Everything that is known or can be known we call the Tonal. The Tonal is distinguished from the rest of the universe, which we call the Nawal. The Nawal is what we cannot know directly and do not know directly. There are clues, however, that the Nawal exists. Mastering the Tonal means basically mastering your life in the physical world so that you can push the envelope out into the Nawal. Each generation of Toltecas, that's the people who are working as Toltecs, each generation, each school, each Toltec party has a responsibility to push that envelope, to push that boundary back. In the olden days, in Europe, Europe, continent, north of Africa, west of Asia, yeah, them. I have some ancestors from there. It's interesting. Anyway, Western civilization is based in the level of knowledge that accumulated in Europe that didn't get burned or was artificially created after all the real knowledge in history books were burned. So they had this idea, this notion of what the world was like, and they had drawn maps, and at the edge of what was known was the unknown. And they didn't like confessing that they didn't know something. So at the edge of the map, they put, "Here be dragons." Meaning, beyond here is only scary stuff, so don't go there. You don't tempt the Toltecas by saying that.
Because we go there.
Absolutely we go there. Dragons? Cool. Nessie, Scotland. Oh. Some of you may not know that I am a Toltec and I am Scottish.
Scottish tilt.
I just saw a good friend who doesn't watch these because he hasn't yet seen the light, but one of my best friends I've known almost 20 years. He's also been to Scotland. Anyway, he just sent me video footage today from an underwater, like a remote controlled sub. It's like an underwater drone, I guess you could say, purporting to have captured footage of Nessie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, the Toltecs, we are always going out there where the dragons are, beyond the level of the known. And it's our job to make more of the unknown world into the known world. That cat is in a dangerous, oh, there she goes, okay. For those of you who aren't in the room, we have cats. And the cats like to rub on the cords, one of the cats in particular. So if you hear crashes and the video and the sound goes haywire, we'll try to put it back together and get back online as soon as we can. The key tool for investigating the universe is your consciousness. And in the Toltec work, we don't think of consciousness the same way as anybody else thinks of consciousness. Our definitions are far richer and more complex because our consciousness doesn't stop with this physical body. We embrace and work with, and part of this training and this course of study is to learn to use all your bodies. Each individual has multiple higher frequency bodies, sometimes called light bodies, and we learn to work with them. They each correspond to another plane of reality. So we use the consciousness inherent in those bodies. We very systematically and proactively interact with the human collective consciousness, which can be likened to a field of energy and information surrounding the entire planet. And in that, in turn, is extended outwards beyond just this planet. There is a universal consciousness, which is kind of where we came from. And Earth is here as, I don't want to describe it as an experiment, although there's a lot of experimentation that has taken place here. Earth is a very specific factory to accelerate the rate at which we can upgrade our consciousness. And why do we want to do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, a lot of which I covered recently in a series of discussions called the Humanity Experience. You can find that on our YouTube channel. That there's a playlist called the Humanity Experience. And if you click on that, you can get to there from our YouTube channel. You can get to it just by clicking on playlists, or you can go to ToltecShamanicarts.org, and there's Golden Eagle Discourses button right there at the top. You click that and it takes you to a page, and then there's links to all the different playlists of some of the major work we've put out. So what we're doing now, we've kind of moved on. The Humanity Experience is the big picture of what is Earth, why are we here, what are these human primate bodies we're driving around, what's all this for? Okay, so that's all covered. I'm assuming if you haven't seen it yet, you will soon, so you'll catch up quickly. So I kind of closed that series last month with, well, now what do you do with that information? So this new series that's going to be ongoing for a time is, what do you do with that information? The first step is you master your world. You have to master your tonal. And there's a lot of pieces that go into that. We had, a few weeks ago, I was coming home late at night and it was dark, and I turned into our driveway and I almost ran over a mountain lion, aka a cougar, and I honked and flashed my lights and chased it off, and hoping that it wouldn't come back. Last night it came back. Somebody woke me up at 1 a.m. and said there's a strange sound outside and I think it's the cougar back. Well, it wasn't one. 2 cougars.
Oh, wow.
And they were making a strange sound I've never heard. When you look at the Disney Channel or any of the other channels, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Is that still on TV?
I don't think so, unless it's like in the archives
Yeah,
somewhere.
no, I know it's not. But the National Geographic, they have video footage of cougars in the wild growling, and they're all. That wasn't what it was. It was this really odd, high-pitched, whiny, squeaking. And so today we looked up the sound, and by we I mean the lovely Aurea Luce over here. Click on your camera, please, just for a moment, and smile and wave at our newcomers.
Well, I was already on television.
Oh, that's right, you were on
television. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, go back to me.
Alright.
Anyway, that's the lovely Aurea Luce, which means golden light. Anyway, she looked it up today, and it turns out that was their mating call we heard, and she played some sound of it. It's like, so now I know firsthand what a mountain lion in heat sounds like. So I went outside, and there was one right out just across the road over here, and just behind the next door neighbor's barn over here, and they were back and forth, and there's this intense power in what was going on. And I'm right in between, right in the middle, right? So that's intense raw energy, this intense raw power. Now that I know it's the mating call that they were trying to hook up, apparently in the wild, all mountain lions are solitary. They don't hang out in packs the way lions in Africa do. Prides, sorry. A group of lions in Africa is called a pride. But over here, they're all solitary. So when it's time to go into heat and mate, they have to come up with these calls that can be heard for miles in order to hook up, find a partner. It's equivalent of getting online on a dating site and finding somebody. You got to spread your attention around a wider area. So I walked out into the middle of that last night, and I could feel that intense energy. And they're got this wild, raw, intense energy, these big, probably 200-pound lions, right outside my stable with my llamas and my chickens and a whole host of other things I would prefer that they not eat.
The dogs weren't happy about it.
All the neighborhood dogs are. But anyway, the key was their intensity, this rawness. And so I fired a shot just to kind of scare them off, and they gradually moved away. Next time I'll use the bigger gun, make more noise. I think they'll go faster. But hopefully they won't come back. But that rawness, there's an intensity of something innate that these wild creatures bring. And they bring it through easily and naturally without thinking about it. And the reason they're so good at that is they don't have a layer on top of that which is consciousness. Oh, they're aware, they're self-aware, they're smart, they're intelligent. But there's a layer of consciousness that humanity has adopted, which is like a mask over this deeper layer that's our raw animal nature. Okay, these wild creatures, like the cougars last night, they are animated by what's called an archetype. There's an archetypal cougar out there in the ethers that gives its energy to every one of the mountain lions, wherever they are in the world. And the pumas, the cougars, the mountain lions, in Florida they call them panthers, which are supposedly officially extinct now.
Florida panthers?
Florida panther, yeah. I saw one when I was there, living there back in the last century. But I think when you get out in the Everglades, I suspect there's more out there, but nobody's found any or seen any evidence for quite a while. But that archetype is what's animating it. That's where that rawness comes from, that raw power. And if you ever had to confront a large wild animal that's a predator, or even not prey animals like the deer, like a little over a year ago, we had a deer get tangled up, a buck, in our gardens, and got wrapped around the nylon cords I used for peas and beans, and he just ripped up my garden and got himself tangled up and trapped. And so I had to get a game warden over there to cut him loose. I couldn't communicate. He wouldn't let me just sit there calmly and patiently while I cut him free. And of course, the tines on his antlers were like that, which would go right through. So, you have to have a respect for that. And with cougars, it's big teeth and big claws and 200 pounds, which is more than most people weigh. Not more than me, but my claws are not quite the same. I would need, one of my man-made claws if I were going to get into it with a cougar. So, yeah, firearms are an improvement in that. I don't have to engage if I had to engage. But that raw instinct, when we want to do what we need to do, it's important to remember that we have two different archetypes that we can tap into and we can draw on. And we need to do that to apply it to the spiritual work. The two archetypes are this human primate that I'm driving around, that all of you are driving around, has an archetype, that primal archetype of the proto-humans before the upgrades started, so that they could host the higher level consciousnesses that we are now bringing through. We can draw on that. The second one we all draw on, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, and is the archetype of the higher human, the higher consciousness that we're bringing through and trying to develop in humanity over time, that is called in the esoteric literature the Adam Kadmon, where some of the different scriptures out there took the story of Adam and Eve, was from this higher archetype from which everyone else is. So we have a human primate cookie cutter archetype, and we have a higher consciousness archetype, and that we need to bring those through. And most people walking around on the planet never do that. They drift mostly aimlessly through life, through school, the first job that comes along. Oh, I want more money. Well, I'll go get another job, I'll go rob a bank, whatever they decide to do. And they never tap in to their higher archetypes, and they never tap into their true purpose for having incarnated here.
Could it be said that both of those archetypes come through on a regular basis, subconsciously? but they're not consciously aware of the archetype, and so in which case it's random. We go back and forth from thinking that we are a higher level being and, having higher level thoughts to responding to things emotionally because we don't really have a grasp of the fact that we have these various natures that we haven't consciously brought together.
Yeah, that's partly what goes on. Then the other layer in there that I haven't mentioned yet tonight is the ego layer, which is your individual body has a mind, and what you're describing is a lot of what goes on in the fourth way work, which is also the Toltec work. The lower emotional centrums that are driving the machine most of the time. So when we tap into it, when you have to lift a car off a child or a pet, you're tapping into that primal archetype, that strength. I just watched a clip today from the movie 300, which is King Leonidas of Sparta leading his 300 warriors in battle, where he takes out at least 10,000 attacking Persians before they all die. I'm sorry if I spoiled the movie for you. The story is almost 3,000 years old, so I really thought you knew the outcome. Apologize for spoiling it for you. And there's a look, and I know some of you have seen me in that mode, where when someone's a warrior, they don't take guff off peons, right? This is the tiger doesn't lose sleep over the opinions and sheep attitude. This is the one where I think just last week I was talking about the quote by Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, about the warrior mind, which was out of every 100 people in a battle, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets. 9 are real fighters, and we're lucky to have them because they make the battle. But the one, the one. One is a warrior, and he will bring all the others back. So there's a look in the eyes. There is a postural change that comes about when you've trained yourself to allow in those higher archetypes. Right? One minute you're lying here relaxing on the sofa or on the bed, and then the next minute you've got lions screeching outside your front porch. So you grab a weapon and you walk out. I had no idea how many I was going to get or what I was walking into. But I knew that somebody needed to go out and that somebody was me. So you go. And you don't know what you're going to need to do, but you do it in the moment. And it's your training that carries you through there. You have to train until your peak performance is your habit. And that's true of fighting lions or fighting humans, martial arts, whether it's your music, whether it's your artwork, whatever it is, you train so that the highest level of peak performance, that's your habit, and when you turn it on, it's there. And part of what you're doing in that state is you're getting your ego filters out of the way, allowing your higher consciousness, i.e. the archetypes, to come through, and you become fully animated. This is a concept that gets missed, that this consciousness that we're so proud of can actually get in the way of action. This is something I learned over the decades with my martial arts training. Way back at the beginning of the year, when we did our Warrior series, one of the authors I referred to was W. Scott Russell, who wrote a book called Karate, The Energy Connection. And he describes that. That may be one of the first places I was exposed to this. And I've had that book. I first got that book 30 years ago or so. And he describes it really well, that why can animals react and move so fast and why humans generally don't. And it has to do with this layer of consciousness where we don't just act, we have to think about it first. That slows us down.
What about that freeze thing, like the deer in the headlights when an emergency's happening?
What about it?
Well, that happens, and I don't know how that quite happens, that freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how can you avoid that freeze thing? And
Training. Right? It happens to the deer because of physiology. Right? Their eyes are different than us. They see at night, right? So they have and a lot of different animals, cats, dogs, they have extra layer inside the eyes to reflect and gather light.
mm-hmm.
Humans don't have that, right? So when a deer is out there and they are in the pitch black and they're going along, minding their own business, and wham, they get hit with a headlight, they literally freeze because it takes them a while for their pupils to dilate, and so there's a period of time there where that's the case. And you know, they've only been exposed to cars with headlights 100 years or so, right? And they've got umpteen million years of evolution. So humans, I know people, I've seen them have the deer in the headlights reaction. I've seen all the color drain from someone's face, so they are literally as white as a sheet. I read that in books, mystery novels, whatever, and I just assumed it was a metaphor. Until one day, during an earthquake in Southern California, I saw one of my office mates do that. It was one of the longer than average earthquakes. And about halfway through it, it got noticeably worse. You could hear things croaking, groaning, and creaking in the big building we were in. We probably should have run out. But I was new to California at the time and didn't know what I know now about earthquakes. And he went white as a sheet. Whiter than that table. Pure white.
They say that in, big disasters, a sinking ship or a stampede or whatever, a fire, that on the average people they just freeze, they don't know what to do until somebody takes action, that one, and then they'll follow them, and if there is no one, then they'll run right into the fire, or like lemmings throw themselves off a cliff or whatever, or they'll just stay there being consumed. And so one of the it's interesting, the mountain lion story, because I heard about a little girl one time that was attacked, and her mom just stood there and screamed. And, everything in me just welled up and said, no, do something, and a hunter came along and pounded the lion and got the kid free. But the point is that some of these things you have to think of ahead of time. Well, what would I do if? And I think a lot of them are just because we never even considered, well, what would I do in case of an earthquake? Well, there's a procedure, you know.
That's the training I'm talking about. And this Toltec work to master your tonal. This is the way we take the unknown. We push that veil back. There's lots of famous artwork about piercing the veil. There's a medieval thing where some sorcerer or something is, you know, you see the world and the planets, but then he's lifting up the veil and looking through, right? It's a famous artwork. I've used it in blogs. I think I've posted it with discussion announcements for this series before. I really like it. I saw it for the first time, I think, in grade school. It was like a long time ago. And I've liked it ever since.
I like it because it's kind of fun and playful, you know.
Yeah.
It's like a serious subject, and yet, you know, it's kind of like we're making
but
fun of it.
yeah, it's capturing a true concept. What that's doing, that's what alchemy has done in the European traditions, is trying to pierce the veil means pushing back the tonal, pushing back the boundaries. And so the way we do that is we have to constantly push ourselves. Complacency and apathy are words that you need to purge from your thought process, from your language. Go through with a black marker and mark them out of your dictionary.
What were they again?
Complacency and apathy. Have no place for anyone doing the higher work. Every moment you should have something you're doing, and you should have an intent, a reason for doing it. When you start to push yourself in new and clever ways, you create new neural pathways. Every one of those new neural pathways you create makes it possible to have another link to your higher bodies, to your higher levels of consciousness. Every new neural pathway, every higher body link makes it easier to learn more information. It makes it easier to then in the future make still more pathways. And every one of these pathways, these higher body links, starts to bridge the gap between your essential self and this biological machine. And then it spirals up. Your dreaming is better, your artwork is better, your music is better, you know, your ability to study and absorb material is better. You push yourself physically. You know, you take up martial arts, you go walking, you go swimming, you whatever you do. But your motion, and this is key. The movements you do need to be conscious and deliberate. Pay attention when you do something as simple and mundane as walking across the room. Become aware of where every part of your body is and how it's moving. Bring that into the conscious awareness of your front brain. Don't just let that reptile brain back there be in charge of your movements. Now, some of you have heard us talk about when we do things, work with intent and have a higher purpose. Now, I'm not just shoveling manure, I'm making food next year, because this manure becomes compost, the compost goes into soil, and then I grow better crops. That's the theory. Okay, so I'm not just shoveling manure, I'm making next year's food. That's one level of attention. that we talk about, and that's one of the ways we upgrade our consciousness. But this other thing I'm telling you about now, by moving your awareness from one part of the brain to another, placing your attention on the movements not because of the desired outcome, but the actual process of shoveling or slicing vegetables or stirring the cake batter or running the dirt sucking machine over the floor. Those actions done with your attention applied differently will cause a swap in your between your thinking centrum and your moving centrum in the higher levels, which results in the rear brain, the so-called reptile brain, which is automatic and much faster. It's been running your movements. You put the movements into the conscious mind, you take your conscious thinking and you put it into a faster processor, basically. And that results in a change in your performance on all levels. And so, to push yourselves into the new world and to use the fullness of the Toltec philosophies, you have to be pushing yourself. Is there a question?
Me.
Yeah.
So it seems like what you're describing, by becoming consciously aware of your action, it almost forces your perception then to be coming from the perspective of the silent witness or the observer, and in making that shift, it shifts the space, in which case then you're in a different space.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's a different way of describing it than I would have used, but I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Your conscious forebrain has a limited RAM, think of it that way. And your overall organism has certain functions that must take place to keep you alive. So by what we're doing is we overload the front brain with activities that are normally running in the background, that takes these required activities from the forebrain. Well, the only processor left is this fast one and back. And then that's basically how we upgrade the processing speed of everything we do. In the shamanic text, there's a series of shamanic textbooks out there called, well, it was originally called the Dune Trilogy. Now there's a whole series, and I was just at a bookstore recently, and I guess Frank Herbert's son, Frank Herbert was the original author, his son has taken over and is writing some more now, and I haven't read any of them.
I heard they're making a new Dune movie.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the original Dune movie that came out in the early 80s, and I vehemently disagree with Coyote in this. He loved the movie, and I thought it sucked. He says, oh, well, in its own right, this is a good movie. It shows this and this and this. And I said, it's not Dune. That's somebody else's interpretation, and they came up with a new story. And I thought it sucked, because I wanted to see the novels that I'd been reading for 10 years. I wanted to see that on the screen. And so the Sci-Fi Channel at one point came out with a 2 or 3 part series of movies that did the Dune. And it was well shot, well played, very well acted. Mostly European actors, a lot from Spain. I think it was actually shot, a lot of it was shot in Spain, if I remember. and it was fabulous. So go watch that one. Don't watch that bad act. Captain Picard was in the bad one.
Oh. Which one was Sting in?
The bad one.
Oh, okay.
So how do you look up the Spanish one?
I don't know. It was on the sci-fi, the Dune Sci-Fi channel. You can probably find it on Netflix and just watch it. If I ever find it in a used video store, I'll get it, but I'm not going to order it and pay full price. But anyway, where was I going with that thought? Oh, the Mentats. They don't use computers in the Dune world, all those worlds, because there were problems in the past, and kind of they make it sound a lot like the Terminator series. The computers were taking over and doing bad things, so they learned not to trust computers. But what they did was they trained people to do the equivalent jobs done by computers, but with our upgraded conscious minds. So the training of a mentat, what I'm teaching here, is kind of like a step in that direction. It's getting your conscious thought onto the faster processor. And then all things are possible, right? What we're also doing by this, it's a multi-step process, is when we link our minds to, I guess you could call it the great central processor, there's nothing preventing us from using the full computing power of the intelligence of the universe anytime we require it. So we have a lot more potential and capabilities that are lying dormant that as a whole of humanity we really haven't used. I mean, there's been times in the past where we started to get close, and then collectively as a species, humanity manages to proverbially shoot itself in the foot, and we stop that, and we blow up continents, and favorite restaurants will close, and life as we know it, you know, they don't even deliver pizza when that happens. Think how bad life would get.
So it's called the Dune TV miniseries from 2000, and it's the one with William Hurt in it.
Yeah, William Hurt played Duke Leto Atreides in the first part of that. His character gets written out of the script early in that. So,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Ori. The process I'm describing is where the rubber hits the road of doing the Toltec work. And quite frankly, doing the higher level spiritual work in any tradition. It doesn't matter what tradition it is, there's 2 or 3 others that I'm involved in, and they all require a high level of personal responsibility and personal discipline. I can't make you want to do that. I can tell you what's required. Some of you know me, and you know that I've done these things. You know Coyote has done these things. You know that it's possible. There's a formula that the Toltec tradition holds on how to do this. And it works. We've held this formula for many tens of thousands of years. Or, in common language, a really long time. But I can't make you want to do that. You have to find that core inside you, that little spark of your essence that's connected to your eternal essence, your essential self, that it's connected to your Adam Kadmon, that's connected to your human primate archetypal, and then you have to bring it. The goal of this work is so that the people engaged all become that one warrior. When you get a whole army of those, part of the scene I watched was when the King of Spartan is off with his bodyguard of 300, that's what Spartan law limited him to, and he needed the approval of their Senate to take the full army to war, and it turns out they've been bribed so they wouldn't give the approval. And so he's off and he meets an army of
10,000, wasn't it?
roughly 10,000 of other Greeks who were gonna go to battle with him. Maybe it was only 5,000, and they're like upset that Sparta was sending so few people. And he knows the leader of the other group. He says, "Hey, old friend." He goes to this man. Who are you, what's your profession? Oh, I'm a potter. What's your profession? Oh, I'm a blacksmith. And there was another one he asked. And none of them asked, what's your profession? None of them said, I'm a warrior. And then he turns to his men. Spartans, what's your profession? And instantly there's this roar from all of them in unison. Hoo, 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 and they're shaking, and you can see the eyes of these other men, and they're like, see, I did bring more warriors. So I watched that again today. That's a good watch. If you haven't seen the movie 300 in a while, I'd go watch it. I have it here. We can do a movie night if I get enough interest and people come over.
It's a good movie.
Yeah. That mindset doesn't have to only be applied towards taking the head off of an invading Persian army. You have to apply it every day. You get up, you have your morning routine, you meditate, you write your dreams down, you do your research, you decide what fields of investigation you're going to pursue. Are you studying Tarot? Are you studying Tree of Life? Are you studying astrology? Are you studying Toltec history? Ori and I did a couple years worth, it's been on hold here for a little while, where we studied and kind of got into very heavily what the academicians think about Toltec history, and we're comparing that to what Toltecs think of Toltec history, and there's a big disconnect, right? And so some of that work culminated in an article I published, came out at the beginning of this year, first or second quarter, in a journal called Ancient American. I published an article where I compared the two. And so whatever you do, you have to pick something and then do it. There's no such thing as idle time. You know, when you need to rest, you say, I'm going to rest, and you rest. And if you're not resting, and that's not your intent, then you should be doing something to push the envelope. You need those neural pathways. You need those higher body connections. We need to work together. We need to be pushing the envelope, both individually, collectively as a Toltec North, collectively as the entire human race. There's work to be done. Question.
Well, I would just say a lot of these things are things that we claim to be interested in. You know, it's not like you're asking us to go, become a, mathematician or something, or to learn to
That's next week.
learn to play chess or something, if that's not part of our true will and intent. But I think we all tend to be dabblers. And so, the thing about it from personal experience is that once you commit yourself to a path, I mean, it doesn't have to be your lifelong spiritual path, but let's say you commit to learning the tree of life. You know, say you're going to take the next 2 years and you're going to learn the tree of life, right? Well, then do it. Learn everything about it, learn the language of it, learn how it's applied, you know, get it out and mess with it at least a couple times a week in your personal practice. So that you actually at least master the basis of that.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you will start to see the results of training your consciousness.
Right.
And you'll start to see how everything's connected and how these things that happen aren't just random, that you're actually invoking them in certain ways. And you'll learn the power of just doing what you say you're going to do becomes a magical act because things start happening.
Yeah. So the tree of life is a really good example, because there's so many layers upon layers of levels of complexity, and you don't have to jump straight to level 10 to use a tree of life pun. You start with where you're at. You start with level 1, and level 1, if you go back through the series of my discussions from the middle of the year called In Quest of Self, that was about the tree of life and how do you really know yourself. And so the tree of life is a map to your consciousness. You want to know what's in there? Well, I can tell you exactly what's in there because there's a map. You look at the map, right? So the 10 spheres, the Sephiroth, learn their names and learn to be able to draw them out. Learn the 22 paths by name. That's the start. Give yourself a month, and at the end of the month be able to sit down with a blank piece of paper and draw the tree of life and identify each sphere and each path. That's the start, okay? That's like the alphabet. And in the case of the Hebrew language, it's literally their alphabet. Their alphabet was derived from the tree of life, not the other way around. So then once you've got that, you can start to doing, okay, well, what does Malkuth mean? What does Yesod mean? What does Hod represent? What does Nitzak represent? And so on, up the tree. Or down there, start at the top. You know, the first path from Kether to Hokmah. It's in Tarot, we call it the Fool. You know, it's that pure innocence. You know, blind, total faith. Not blind. It's not blind because you're not smart enough to see the pitfalls. It's pure faith in the pitfalls don't matter because you're on your divine mission and all the obstacles will be removed from your path, and you trust that, and it only becomes an issue when you're off track, when you're not on your path of your true will. So yeah, the tree of life example. But astronomy, you know, I've got a lot of people who follow me regularly who aren't left-brained and who are horribly resistant to learning math and chess. Well, go learn Mahjong, okay? That's even harder to learn than chess in terms of it teaching its left-brained logical strategies, but the pieces have colors on them, you know, so it's the artist in you. Go learn Mahjong. And you could probably win. You could even easily beat me because I'm a terrible Mahjong player. I used to play on the computer, and then that computer died eons ago, so I don't have a computerized Mahjong game to practice on anymore. But yeah, there should be a need and an urgency within you that no one else can put there. And if you've seen everything that you've seen in life, and if at any point in your life you've ever had the vaguest idea the slightest notion, a weird daydream, almost as if something you remember and you can't remember if it was a deja vu or a dream or something, that there's something you're supposed to do. And it feels important, but you can't remember what it is. If you have any hint of that, that is the whisperings from your higher self, from your daemon, from your essential self, that you do in fact have a true purpose, and you need to get about the work of finding it. And then once you know it, then you got to do it. So if you've followed this Toltec work for a while, and you've heard that, and you know that you have something you're supposed to be doing, or maybe you're watching this for the very first time tonight. This is some friend told you, "Oh yeah, come watch this. This is this weird, crazy shaman dude in Mount Shasta," and you're like, "Oh man, this guy's weird." A, yes, and B, that doesn't change the fact that what I'm telling you is a message you need to hear. I mean, why would you want to do anything with a shaman who wasn't weird? Seriously.
Coyote did say you're the most balanced shaman he knows.
But what's the baseline?
Right?
Yeah. That a balanced shaman, that's like a total oxymoron. So I'm like one little tick mark more balanced than all the other crazy shamans out there, right? Why? Yeah, you don't want a normal shaman. You gotta go for the weird.
And yet we don't want a goofy guru either.
Ah, yes. We'll tell that story. For those who don't know the inside joke, there was a friend of mine once upon a time met an individual who called itself the Goofy Guru and came to Mount Shasta to experience Mount Shasta for the first time ever. And this individual holds the record for once they arrived in Mount Shasta and got exposed to the inherent energies here, of having the fastest meltdown ever. And becoming stark raving mad, screaming raving mad in less than an hour.
Wow.
Less than an hour. And this individual called itself the Goofy Guru.
What story do you want?
Yeah, we can. If anybody wants to hear that story this weekend, we'll tell the whole thing. But long story short is, you want someone who's actually walked the walk and not just talked the talk. But you don't want a normal shaman, because what's the point? So whatever it takes for you to activate that spark in you, that's the point in time where humanity's at. It's time to hit the on switch. And I said this before as a suggestion, I'm saying it more firmly now. Everybody needs to be learning a musical instrument. Everybody needs to be doing artwork. Everybody needs to be doing something that's left-brained, like science and math and chess or mahjong. Everybody needs to be doing something that's right-brained. Art being a really good one that's helped me a lot. You need to be pursuing your intellectual interests around the higher levels of spirituality. If you want to be in a higher spiritual school and never want to crack a book and you never want to do your reading, then why are you here? We have the ultimate means of uploading new information, even without the internet. It's called a book, right? Well, that's my journal. But books. I got a whole room full of books. And I've read a lot of them, most of them, in fact. So if Tarot is your thing, then master Tarot. Truly master it. There's a term in American history called a jack of all trades. Actually comes from Europe. Jack of all trades, but a master of none. Mm-hmm. That means you're good at a lot of different things, but you're not an expert at any of them. Mm-hmm. So what I'm challenging you to do is to become an expert at all of them. Become a master of all trades pertaining to your work. And this work is about consciousness upgrades, which is what we sell here, along with consciousness upgrade accessories. So we're trying to take humanity to places where it's never gone before. And in order to do that, we have to get back up to where humanity was about 15,000 years ago, and we're not there yet. Is that a question I saw over here?
Yeah, I can ask a question at this point. Is that the opportunity that's upon us with this portal being open for 10 days?
It's the opportunity to do this work is always here. Periodically, different things align and there's an opportunity for something extra. It was what, 3 or 4, almost 4 years ago, we had 3 years ago, I can't remember. It was, I think it was still this century. We had a total eclipse of the sun, went across the U.S. and Ori and I drove up to Oregon, and I used that a window of opportunity to gain some insight into some unique aspects of the Akadua energy that could only be done, could only have been done in the path of totality of a total solar eclipse. So I've been working with the Akadua for a really long time. That was about the time I had transitioned from level 4 to level 5. So I was obviously not a beginner. But that was an extra opportunity. And so we set an intent and we went and we got a download that was not possible any other way. So this window, there's an astrological something, there's a window and there's a lot of extra energy coming through that many of us, I think everybody in this room, are physically feeling something. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those times where you don't want to try and totally ground that out. You want to, for those of you who are level 3 and above and know the vitriol, this would be a good time to go do some more vitriol. So this work this opportunity to upgrade your consciousness, the collective consciousness. This is a work that the opportunity is always here, and then there are certain times where it becomes more important. You know, it's like that meme I like referencing about the dinosaurs watching Noah's Ark sailing away. Like, shoot, was that today? Meaning, they missed the ark, they missed the boat, that's why they got wiped out. So there's opportunities, and when you miss the boat, and the door slams shut, and the gangplank is withdrawn, and the boat sails away, and you're not on it, you missed that. If I'd said, oh, it's not convenient to take time off work to go see the total eclipse, I'll drive up to Oregon tomorrow. You wouldn't have seen a thing, right? Because the totality, the phase, was about 2.5 minutes long. You had to be in the right place at the right time for that 2.5 minutes. Otherwise, you would have missed it. I talked, we spent the night up at a hotel in Oregon, as close as we could get because everything else was booked. And I was talking to some people around the swimming pool and trying to explain the difference between partial and total eclipse. And even though they're at, I'll just watch it here, it's 95%, you know, that's close enough. No, you miss everything. You're either, it's a binary state, either you're in that path of totality or you're not. And there's a lot of windows of opportunity we have to do work, to get on board, to accomplish things, where either you do it or you don't. And a missed opportunity is a missed opportunity. So the first key step of mastering the Tonal is you gotta find that part of you inside. That connection to your archetypes. And you have to make a conscious choice. Yeah, I'm going to master this Tonal. I'm going to become the master of all aspects of my world. And I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get my physical, biological machine in better shape. I am going to get my mind in better shape. I am going to get my spiritual and psychic capabilities honed. I'm going to actually practice my meditations. There's power in making that commitment.
And responsibility.
Yeah, there is responsibility. There's power in that when you make that commitment, because you're making a pact with yourself, with your eternal essence, with your incarnation. Remember, an incarnation is a terrible thing to waste. When you see how much effort goes into getting the astrology lined up for the perfect time and a perfect host set of parents to bring through what you are uniquely here to do. And then when you realize the big picture about human race and Earth, and everyone here has a piece they're supposed to be doing, and most people are wandering around, ooh, shiny, yeah, that's isn't that cute, isn't that pretty? Oh, look, yeah. Easily distracted.
You know, we were talking earlier about that primate mind, or, you know, basically our animal instincts. And when you look at nature, you know, there's a rhythm to things. I mean, think about an anthill or a beehive where every every insect in there has a purpose. And if they just say, well, I'm not going to work today, I'm just gonna hang out and, sit in the shade, the whole circle of life of nature is gonna become chaotic.
Right.
And we're the only species that doesn't get that.
We have a lot to be thankful for two things. One is our consciousness. The other is our opposable thumbs. This is how we physically manipulate the world. But both of them get us into trouble sometimes. And the consciousness layer, we have, as a human race, we have not mastered consciousness. And that's another aspect of the Toltec work. If you haven't mastered yourself, you've got no business trying to master anybody else. So the idea of, it's not so much we turn off our conscious layer, turn on our animal layer at different times. There's a merging, it's a blending. You have the consciousness of the machine, you have the consciousness of the essence, and you have to then consciously merge that with your archetypal consciousnesses.
There had been a comment last week, that was kind of along that lines, and I think it's for those who are new to our audience. The intent is not to destroy or eliminate the ego, that the ego has a specific job, and that's to take care of those automatic things. And yet, in many philosophies, people are trying to completely eliminate that or subject it or something like that, and it's more of a befriending. Can you speak to that?
It's a partnership. There's a drawing and a discussion about this exact thing in the book Teachings of a Toltec Survivor by Coyote the Blind, where he draws the carriage with the horse and the driver and the passenger. And the passenger is our essence. And the passenger knows where we're all supposed to go. The driver is our ego mind. And the horse, to a certain extent, represents our physical body, the innate functions of the biological machine. And it's all us, the carriage, the driver, it's all us. But the goal is to get from point A to point B so that then the essence can accomplish something. But you have to be able to communicate with the driver has to be able to communicate with the horse has to be fed and cared for, the driver has to be fed and cared for. The bearings on the wheels need to be lubricated, right? So everything works smoothly. And the ego, which was your question, that everybody wants to turn off, that would be like eliminating the driver from that equation, from that model. It's like, well, the passenger in this model doesn't have the ability to get up and go steer the horse. Right? The horse is trained to listen to the driver, not the passenger. So the ego needs to be a partnership, and part of this work involves teaching the ego that the knee-jerk survival reaction that kept us alive when we were young, until the consciousness and the physical body are fully developed, that the things that worked when we're a child don't work now, especially when we have a higher level mission we've agreed to do. So the ego, yeah, it's a partnership we're seeking between the essence, and the best way to bring that about is you constantly reassure the ego mind that it's not like you're trying to get rid of it, that you're giving it a better job. You know, it's anytime we get a new job, we have to learn new skills. So, you know, you get promoted, right? Oh, now I got new skills and I don't have to go do those things I used to do before. But if people are just given a new job and no training, then they will naturally kind of wander back and gravitate to doing what they know and they're good at, which is yelling and screaming and throwing things. Those sorts of things.
So in that, I'm just trying to, look for things that help us understand how to apply this to our own, circumstances. And, obviously we're trained to observe. So when we see our habits, we have an idea of what's going on, and when we're observing, we're actually seeing from the essence's perspective.
Yeah.
And when we see, let's say, potentially negative habits of the ego, we feel the sense that we want to suppress that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's things like driving the car, which we do kind of on autopilot. And so I think one way that I've heard that described is that, when we're trying to work with consciousness, it's like taking the airplane off of autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that makes us more responsible for not crashing the plane and knowing exactly what we're doing. And yet there are times when we want to consciously put ourselves on autopilot so that it can take care of driving us from here to LA and doing all of those things without having to consciously think about each one of those maneuvers.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, the autopilot analogy. When you're in clear air with no turbulence and no storms and there's no other aircraft flying up there trying to shoot you down, autopilot is worked. I mean, you can get up, you can stretch your legs because you might have to go back and use the restroom. Right? So you go on auto. That's why there's two pilots, right? So then if something bad happens, like all of a sudden, boom, an engine catches on fire and the pilot's in the back of the plane in the restroom, that could be bad. So you need two pilots. But the difference is, from an engineering standpoint, is the difference between what happens when everything's going right and what happens when something goes wrong. And in the aerospace world and rocket science world, we spend at least twice as much of our time and effort planning, maybe 3 or 4 times, planning for what happens when things go wrong. Not just what happens when things go right. And to a certain extent, that's required in this spiritual work. Meditation is great and wonderful till you trip into spaces that have creatures that want to eat you, right? On the higher planes, and you will. So yeah, you have to be prepared for that. You have to realize what your fears are. You have to realize that, we have bad habits that we don't admit to in public. Right? So, we don't talk about those yummy bad habits in public. But we've got them. And if you're in denial, you're cruising that river in Egypt, denial, then you will, when you try to climb the tree of life and you don't have a solid foundation, then you will come crashing down. And you can injure yourself physically and psychically in ways that prevent you from doing the higher work and thus possibly prevent you from accomplishing the true will you came to this planet to accomplish. In which case you probably get taken out and recycled, meaning your machine dies.
So if nothing else, we should be working on self, because we really aren't in a position to be doing higher level work until we've, faced
Yeah.
our fears and got our buttons under control and that kind of thing.
Right. And that's the kind of thing that happens in an esoteric school. And, we all go through phases. I go through phases where I go from student to student and I push hot buttons and, and then I come back and so if you don't think I've gotten to you recently, just be patient, I'll get to you. And, it requires a level of discipline, a level of what I often call ruthless self-honesty. Absolutely brutal, ruthless self-honesty. And if you can't be honest with yourself when you're in a closed room and nobody else is there, then this work isn't for you. You've got to be able to do that, and you've got to say, well, darn it, I wanted to be doing 25 push-ups by this time this month, and I can only do 18, so I'm goofing off. Or whatever the tarot equivalent or astrology study equivalent for those of you who've recently undertaken astrology studies, whatever that equivalent is. It's
Well,
like,
just to meditate for 20 minutes every day,
yeah,
I mean, 20 minutes is a long time for some people, but to do it once is one thing, to do it daily is a
right.
completely different.
Everybody can goof off for 20 minutes a day. That's
Yeah.
easy. Everybody can take a nap for 20 minutes a day. But to sit quietly and place your mind in a very specific brainwave frequency pattern, that requires more discipline. And that's why so few people do this work, because first off, it's disguised as work. And our society is training people to not want to do work. Can't someone else do it? There's a whole Simpsons episode once on can't someone else do it? Any other questions online? Comments?
Well, isn't some of it that society trains us to be individuals? And that is, in a way, the individuality that society's mask is taking us away from our archetypes, taking us away from doing everything you're talking about tonight. And that it's like we're not working in a beehive doing our part as worker bees.
I would say you got the right gist of it, but except for your premise. Your premise is that society is trying to teach us to be individuals, is what you said. And absolutely not. They want us to be cookie cutter, mindless drones, just like the novel 1984. No, they don't want people thinking.
Well, maybe individual wasn't the right word, but
Okay. Yeah, I think you're onto it. They want you, they don't want you capable of independent thought. And they specifically don't want groups of people working together in a unified manner.
In that case, though, they are separating us from our support system.
Yeah, that part's
they're
true.
separating us from our families, our communities, our religions, whatever,
Yeah.
our cultures.
That's all true.
And with the guise that we are an individual, and yet
that's what I was trying to refer to.
yeah.
Okay.
But and really, when you look back in the known history, so the last 6,000 years, I mean, we don't have a lot of examples of individualism where people are whole, self-confident individuals.
Right. They vilify that now.
Yeah.
On the one hand, they vilify it, but the other, they hold it out there like this, like the superhero movies that have become so popular in the last 10 years. And, you know, I've lost track, you know, the Batmans, the Supermans, the Thors, the Captain Americas, and now the good guys are all fighting the other good guys, or whatever it's devolved into. They hold that model out there, but there's this undercurrent that we can't do that. Right? Oh no, you didn't get bit by the radioactive spider, so you can't have superpowers. Or you didn't come from the planet Krypton, so you can't have Superman powers. Or you didn't do the however Batman got his superpowers, his lifelong watching his parents be died and then dedicating himself to this program of study, and you know, Batman brings it, right? But the implication is we can't. And I'm telling you, A, you can, and B, you should.
Well, isn't that also the church though? Because they didn't want us to believe what Jesus said, that
Right.
quote, that you could do what I do, but you
Yeah.
could do it better.
Right.
And
So there are certain religions.
That all falls under they.
Yeah, it's an authority figure limiting you and limiting the collective that they deny exists, and they do it a lot of different ways. So we could do a whole 100-year-long series about all the ways authority figures on this planet have tried to undermine.
like your
Human
parents,
capability.
you don't have an invisible friend.
Right.
And that isn't even a conscious effort on their part as much as just lack of faith in self, which is kind of where you're going. That
Yeah.
we as a culture have forgot that we have superpowers and that we can do things. And you know, when just studying ancient structures like Stonehenge and stuff, to realize that these people were working with primitive tools and primitive abilities, and yet they had the ability to sense where ley lines were, where energetic forces were, to understand astronomy and use what they had to master
Yeah.
that.
Clearly, Stonehenge and most of the other megaliths were done using relatively crude tools, but with a high level of knowledge. That whole phenomenon, worldwide pattern, shows that there was advanced knowledge in the past. You go back to certain other places in the past, and in our megalithic cultures, shows that because they're made of stones that we don't have the ability to move today. They're too big. We can't move them, even if we could get the cranes to the top of those mountains, right? You know, the Maze Howe. Remember Maze Howe? Maze Howe is what, a chambered cairn, is that what that's called? In the Orkney Islands of Scotland, which Ori and I have been to. And it's a big mound that was man-made, built over a stone building that had spiritual significance, and it was aligned with summer solstice or fall equinox.
I think it's winter solstice.
Winter
but
solstice,
they're
you're
each
right.
different.
Yeah, it's coming up. And so when you're inside the chamber, it's either the sunrise or the sunset on the day of winter solstice shines right down this tunnel that we walked into when we did the tour. And one wall of this tunnel, which is at least, I don't know, 50 feet long and 7 or 8 feet high, one wall of that was made out of a single stone.
Right.
That's so big and so heavy and so awkwardly shaped that when they computed the weight, it's like we don't have any construction equipment today that could lift that. And yet there it is, moved, and they know they got it over there someplace, you know, umpteen miles away, and brought it here. And the Andes Mountains in South America are full of those. And when you go back far enough, here's the interesting part. You go back far enough, you find some of these stones that were obviously carved with a laser, right? So at some point we did have technology. Some of them they found still in the quarries, and they have evidence of a very, very, very large rotary saw, probably with carbide or diamond tip blades. Because, you know, when you're cutting through a piece of wood and you stop and you come out, there's like the curved shape, right? So here's this cutting through solid rock about yay wide, maybe like a centimeter or less, and they've looked and shined the lights and measured, and it's curved, right? This was a giant, like a radial arm saw that went, only it was cutting blocks bigger than this house.
Perfectly, mind you.
Yeah, right. So there's a level of human collective consciousness that has been deliberately hidden. And part of our job in the Toltec work is to get that back. We need to at least get back to what we once had so that we can press on.
Well, maybe we're not worthy as a collective humanity
Well, there's
of the knowledge.
certainly there are aspects of that that are true.
But you know, there is this concept where a lot of people think that we're being suppressed and held down, and clearly there are, you know, slave masters out there that would like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the reality is we, you know, when it's like a bunch of lab rats that when they're given all the heroin and versus food, they eat the heroin. You know, we've become a complacent, abusive society.
I read a study that looked at that very phenomenon, the lab rats and heroin versus food. Mm-hmm. And what it came down to wasn't heroin versus food, it's addictive, let's go eat the heroin. It had to do with their culture. Mm. They got lab rats in a closed rat-sized room with nothing to do, and they're checking out.
Right, yeah.
So then they created a different culture, a big area with trees and plants and water and games and all this kind of things to do, and then they did the heroin water, the regular water, and the food, and every now and then a rat would wander over, oh yeah, that's okay, and try some of it, but they would use the regular water and the food because they had a society.
Right.
They had stimulation in the environment.
Right. So they had friends, they had whatever. They weren't locked in a room all alone with nothing to do except, oh man, if I do this, I can check out and I'm not locked in this jail. Right?
Well, it's like a work dog, you know, that you try to keep in an apartment and dress up like a poodle.
Right.
And, you
They
know,
go nuts.
they're go ballistic and they, you know, rip your shoes and your pillows up and everything because they don't have a purpose.
Yeah.
And you put them on a sheep ranch and they have a purpose and they're happier and they don't, you
Right.
know, do anything wrong.
So that I'm glad you brought that up. That rat heroin
Yeah.
example, because
Yeah, I
when
hadn't heard that.
I went, yeah, it's like a year ago I read
Makes
that,
sense, though.
and I was like, so interesting that that's what was being done. And so part of what we are doing with this Toltec work is we're reinstituting the ancient cultural model of the Tolteca-Yotl philosophy of how you integrate a society, and that's what we need as our baseline to push humanity forward.
You know, that's interesting that you guys bring up that rats and the heroin example, because in a way all our kids now are indoors gaming.
Mhm. Yeah, they don't have a purpose.
They don't have a purpose.
They don't know how to play, they don't
Yeah.
know how to communicate, they don't know how to, you
Use
know.
the imagination, so it's recreating the rats in a small room.
Yeah.
And it also gives me more insight into some of these studies. Because, you know, it's like, yeah, you put two rats in a box and you figure out, okay, they're gonna do this, but you give them three choices and maybe they're gonna do something completely different
Right.
than what the results said.
So yeah, I thought that was that study that I read. I thought it was brilliant. We need more things like that.
So Maria has a question.
Maria, yes.
What can you tell us about shamanic drumming? Can you recommend a book or any links or tapes as to how to do it? Also, what is it supposed to accomplish?
Okay, I can, yes. The classic shamanic drumming is done at a very particular frequency. It's 120 beats a minute. So 2 a second. And that enhances the ability to then enter into the astral state. I have a CD, and I don't remember the name. I'll have to look at.
It's not the Harner one.
Might be the Michael Harner one.
So can I just say something about that?
Hang on. But it might not be, because there's 2 or 3 drumming CDs we have, but one of them specifically has a 15-minute or a 30-minute timed,
That's the Harner one.
and it's at 120 beats a minute. And I used to use that a lot more in the past. I'm not doing it so much now, primarily because the training I've done and some of the more advanced Toltec techniques have ways of getting there without that. But that's what the drumming does. And so that particular CD, if you want to experiment with that, it's very safe. You hit play and it goes, let's say, 15 minutes, and then the drumming changes and it brings you out of it kind of peaceful.
It's good for meditation.
Yeah, and so it helps you meditate and it helps get you into that astral state. That's what shamanic drumming is for. The Eurasian shamans have a term called riding the drum. Or that's what they do. They often work in a pair, often a husband-wife shaman pair. One of them will ride the drum and the other is the drumming and kind of the watcher. And they go in and they go do their thing. So I hope that answers your question. What did you want to add?
Just because there is a little online conversation about Michael Harner, for those of you who are not up on different resources for shamanism. Michael Harner has an Institute of Shamanism. I believe it's based in New York City, or in New York anyway. And
New York City?
Yeah, and so basically there's kind of a phenomenon where a lot of the indigenous cultures no longer have new up-and-coming elders in their tribes who are going to take on the traditions. And at the flip side of that, because they've become westernized, and the flip side of that is a lot of Western culture who have been stripped of their cultural history are now seeking that, and we kind of fall into that, you just sense it, and it's something you need. So Michael Harner supposedly studied many different shamanic cultures from all over the world and extracted out some basic things that he believes represent what a shaman is doing. And one thing I would say about that is that often we look at what shamans are doing and we think it's all about drumming and chanting and working with herbs or healing people or whatever. And those are all aspects that a shaman can use as a tool. But no one shamanistic group will do the same traditions. And as an urban shaman in this Western world, we need to develop our own cultural heritage. And even within the Toltec lineage, not all of that has come down as a set of rituals that need to be performed. And so we often borrow and use, from each other. So all of that said, one thing I would say about the Michael Harner's, I think biggest contribution is this 120 beats per minute, as far as a hypnotic kind of trance-like entrance into the dreaming or the bardo, or however you want to look at that. it's difficult to do yourself, I find. You know, like, well, I have repetitive motion injuries, so to drum at that speed and actually drum for yourself.
Right.
It's another thing to
you
drum
can't.
for someone else. So that's where these drumming pieces that he has available are just nice and clean, you know, 120 beat per minute segments that you can use for your meditation and training and work with them. There are a lot of really cool drumming CDs out there. There's a lot that will probably have the 120 beats per minute.
A lot of them don't, I
Yeah,
found.
right.
I looked at a lot back a number of years ago, and most of them, you know, they would combine drumming with some flute music or a stringed instrument, and then they varied the pattern, and it was lovely music, but it's not the right, just the drumming at 120 beats a minute to get you in that state. Any other comments or questions?
Does the tone of the drum matter?
I don't know. Most it probably does, because there's a different that hurts here. Most of the shamanic drums are similar the world over. This is one that you had, Oria, before we even met.
All right.
And you can see that its
That's
size is a certain thing. Well, that's not it. That's something else.
I think I might have the beaters. Oh,
I have one here.
okay.
If I get it out of the drum. It got in there, and assuming it comes out. So this one, I'm not going to go real loud because we haven't warmed it up properly, but that's about the right rate. And this one is mine, and it's a little deeper.
Buffalo, huh?
I think so. I don't know. So both of these would work in terms of the frequency. The tone, there's probably a lot more leniency in the exact tone of the drum, but it's that 120 beats a minute is more important, because both of those drums would get you there, and they're not the same tone.
What's the matter with you?
Any other questions?
Besides, Pamela wants to contact you about some other stuff. I gave her your email,
Okay, cool.
and you should probably talk about your weekend.
Oh, the weekend, yeah. So Friday, I think we said 7 o'clock. This Friday night is kind of sort of optional. If everybody who's going to be coming is up in the area and you want to come Friday, we'll be doing some things around the backyard fire pit if the weather is compatible. Otherwise,
Dress warm.
yeah, it'll be cold. We were out around the fire last night and it was cold. And it was beautiful, it was clear, it was lovely, and that's probably what got the cougars in their amorous mood. Then sunrise Saturday, the day of the solstice, sunrise is, I seem to recall, about 7:30. If you're here, we're going to be down at our labyrinth, again, weather permitting, marking the point of the sunrise. We've been tracking this for 10 years now, and we've been able to track the change in the Earth's axis. It's transpired a little bit. Sunrise and sunset are no longer in the place they were 10 years ago. So if you're here, we will do that. We're going to be doing a lot with the again, the theme is mastering the tonal. So mastering your world. What do you need to do to master your world? Well, the first thing you need to be is to be aware of your world. And so we're looking at, and I'm going to be talking a lot about the cycles of the seasons and the monthly cycles, the yearly cycles, and how to use those energies to help you master your world. The morning, we're probably going to be doing a little bit more inside. I want to broadcast part of it for the students who absolutely positively can't be here and have a good reason, like they're stuck in Wisconsin and can't get away.
Or SoCal.
So I will probably know in the next day or two exactly what time that will start. Assume sometime around 9:30
In the morning
in
on
the
Saturday?
morning. That I'll be broadcasting something.
9:30 on Saturday.
Yeah, and then we'll do that for a couple of hours. We're going to be doing some activities to mark the sunrise, midday, sunset as the day progresses, which I will be teaching you and showing you. For those of you who happen to be here at sunrise, you'll get to see. I will teach you that technique. I've taught it before. And there's extremely amount of power in doing this to get you back in tune with the natural cycles, which gets you into a point of working with the world and working with your biological machine, not fighting against them. And then the afternoon probably won't be online, but I will give some homework for, like if you're in the far end of Southern California or Wisconsin, some things you can do on your own then. And it's all about gaining control of your world, the natural cycles, and depending on who's here when, either Friday night or Saturday night, and again, all weather dependent, I have something I want to do around the bonfire. And it would be a little more powerful on Saturday, but we'll see what the weather forecast is. So, if you don't plan on being here physical, contact us and we'll get you hooked up. And if you are going to be here, then be here. I think that's it. We went longer than I was planning tonight. Good questions, everybody. So let's go offline.